Just give us around 5 minutes and we should get flying for today. So. For those who are watching live, welcome to the lecture. And if you're watching this for the first time, well, you can read through the About page and visit our website as well. So today we'll actually be getting into the main show, which is React Native, and we'll be spending 90% of our time there, just for people who are live and on the call as well.
மா இங்க இருந்து இதேங்கம்மா இருக்கு இது பெட் ஸ்ப்ரெட் எங்க இல்ல அது கொஞ்சம் காயணும் போல இருக்கு எங்க வச்சிருக்கேன் இங்க இருக்கா லைட்டா காத்தாடு இதுவா லைட்டா காத்தாடணும் வேற எதுவும் நான் போட்டு முறையில காயமா இந்த துணிதான் இந்தாமா
Jaychandran, can you please stay on mute?
I think I'm muted.
No, you are not on mute.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, your voice is coming through clearly. Also, can one of you do me a quick favor and upload the live link to YouTube? To WhatsApp, because WhatsApp web for whatever reason is not starting up on my laptop. So.
Just a second, I will try doing it. I have to find your channel on YouTube, but
you don't really need to. On Zoom, I think there's this drop down that just says go on live on YouTube, and over there and there you should just be able to find the copy link option.
I'm on phone. Let me check here.
Yeah. Okay. If you're on phone also, I think the channel's name is RN50. The same channel where we upload supplement lectures.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, Pranav, I did that.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Welcome.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So welcome everyone. This is RN50. Welcome back to all. Great to see you back again. And today we're actually going to get into the main meal or the main course of our meal, which is React Native. But before that, let's actually talk about state, because I know a lot of you actually had trouble understanding what state was last week. I know React, we went at a very, very fast pace last week, but I think state was especially complicated. So let's quickly spend around 5 to 10 minutes talking about state. So I'll just clear all this text. And so you can think of state essentially as literally state, okay? Now, if you're talking about, let's take, for example, like a football match, okay? The state of a football match would essentially be the current position. So you might want to talk, if you're talking about the current state of the football match, you might want to talk about how many goals each team has scored, who is in the lead. You might want to talk about, for example, the elapsed time, how much time has already gotten over in the match, how much time has been wasted, so how much will be the extra time, and essentially which player has got a red or yellow card, right? So you all with me so far? So let's actually, and let's give you one more example. So say you're talking about a chess match. In a chess match, the state would be the position of each piece on the board, how many pieces white has killed, how many pieces black has killed, how long has the chess game been going for. And in a cricket game, for example, the state would be the runs of the batting team. If this is the first or second innings, and if it is the second innings, how much is required, and the scorecard. And of course, the economy of the bowlers and so on and so forth. So let's translate this into some basic JavaScript code. Now I'm not going to write this in VS Code again. And this is not exactly code. You can kind of imagine this as an algorithm, or like basically not exactly code, but more English-like syntax. So say we want to state, we could say this dot state equals, we open up our curly braces, that is essentially an object, if you remember from week 0. And now if I want to say, let's talk about our football match. So we would say team 1 goals, colon, and say they've not scored any goals. They're a very bad team. So 0. Now, you may notice I'm not writing equal to, I'm writing colon because this is an object. So team 1 goal is essentially the key or the name, and 0 is its value, okay? Then we can say team 2 goals will be, say they're a very good team, they scored 4 goals, okay? And we're putting commas after each of these. Elapsed time is, say, around, let's say 10 minutes, okay? What else did I mention? Well, wasted time will be around 12 minutes, okay? That these teams have been sledging at each other for. I know this is not realistic, but just bear with me for a moment. Anyone would want to add any other values to this whole list? What else might you find in a football match? So we've got team 1's goals, we've got team 2's goals, we've got the elapsed time, and we've got the wasted time. What else would you want to add? You can just unmute and speak. So one more will be like the venue. So venue could be like a string. We could just say, I don't know, some random venue. I don't know football venues. I'm just going to say hi as a venue. Okay. Now, this is just for testing purposes. So we have this state, right? Everyone understanding so far? Any questions? You can just unmute and ask about the state. So it's just, as we said, a JavaScript object. All right, so now say we want to change, say team 1 has suddenly scored 2 goals. Say we want to change that, right? There's this very simple function in JavaScript that you can call, which is just called this.setState, and you open up parentheses and curly braces, and you essentially pass in the keys and values of the different things that you want to change. So we want to change team 1 goals. So we would just say team 1 goals, and we could just say they scored 2. So we just change the state, right? So essentially that is what state is. It's very simple. You can just say the current position of the application, and the values that really matter, you would store them in a state. So essentially the values that are going to change later on and that are important to you, those will be stored in the state. And you can look at my supplement lecture on state for more information. But essentially that, and yes, if any of you still have any difficulties with React, prop state, or even JavaScript, you can stay back at the end of the class and we can talk one-on-one. All right, so questions about state before we start out with React Native. Anyone? All right, so as I said, now we're actually getting into the main course of our meal, which is React Native. And let's actually move back. What would anyone like to tell me? What did I say in lecture 0 about React Native? Why would we choose React Native? Would anyone like to answer?
I would say for cross-platform application development.
Yeah, so it's for cross-platform application development, right? And it's essentially for you to, as the Facebook team said, when they were creating this, whoops, there we go. They said you can say it's learn once and write anywhere, and it's an open source library popularized by Facebook. So it essentially lets you learn once and write run it anywhere. So that would mean like you can easily just write one code base and run it on Android or iOS, or even these days, thanks to Expo, on the web. So let's talk about how does it produce cross-platform apps. Now, if you attended my week 0 lesson, you may remember there are 3 ways of producing cross-platform apps. Would anyone like to tell me what the 2 ways are that, well, all the 3 ways actually, of producing cross-platform apps? So what's the easiest way of producing a cross-platform app? I'm not sure who that is. Could you please mute yourself if you're not answering or asking? So the easiest way is essentially just to make a website and have the user connect to it, right? Through their browser on their phone. And why is that bad? Why do you think that is not native? Or why is that bad? Would anyone like to share their views on that?
Sorry, can you
Why is
please
it bad?
repeat the question?
So the easiest way that you could make something cross-platform is essentially just to make a website and have users connect to it through their phone, right? And even these days, websites are more called web apps. So why is that bad? Why would you not want to create a website and have users connect to it through their phone's web browser?
I'd say due to the fact that a website does not make fully use of your device's components, native components.
Yeah, so the website, you can say, is far away, right? It lives somewhere in the cloud. It can't really access your device because, let's face it, there are around 1 quadrillion devices connected to that website at once, right? So how is it going to access your device? Because it's in the cloud. So, and also it has a performance decrease because you're actually connecting to it, and every time you're doing something, you're actually telling that thing that stays, say, probably 100 miles away from you in the cloud, you're telling it that, hey, someone tapped on this link, and then it has to do its thing and return back. So it's not done locally on your device, and so that internet transfer is going to cost resources, and it's going to be slow. And it'll also be very dependent. It'll be dependent on your internet. If you have a very good internet, say you have 5G, it's going to be very good. It's going to be very fast, right? It's going to be almost as good as, or if better, running. It's going to be probably even better than running something on your device. But say you have like a edge network, which is actually not even seen these days. But just bear with me. Say you have like an edge network or like a 2G or 3G network. It's going to take you ages. It's going to take you a gazillion seconds to connect to that one website, right? So it's very dependent on people and their internet. So, okay, let's look at what's better. Well, there's also one way to like use what's called a web view on the device that basically lets you render any web content. And you can basically just open that app and it'll look like it's in the browser, but it's actually downloaded to your phone. So, okay, that's better, right? I mean,
That
you
still
don't have
takes time because it loads the pages onto your device.
It's better. It's better because you can download it on your phone, and it's closer to your device than something in the cloud. But as Ashley just correctly pointed out, it takes time, right? I mean, it still has to load stuff. And it's just, again, it's HTML. It's not as close to your device. So then comes something like React Native. So let's talk about what React Native does and how does it do this cross-platform. Well, if you remember from weeks where I talked about JavaScript engines. So could anyone, just quick review question, name a few JavaScript engines? Doesn't matter which browser it is, you can just name a few JavaScript engines that I mentioned in week 0.
I think Chrome uses V8.
Yeah, Chrome uses V8, and then there's SpiderMonkey for Firefox, and so on and so forth, right? And so turns out, at that time I said that JavaScript engines are only present in browsers. Well, I told you a white lie. Turns out even phones, and in fact laptops as well, are starting to have JavaScript engines. So, well, what did Facebook do with React Native? They were very smart. They essentially said, okay, you know what? A JavaScript engine is really, really close. Because this, nowadays, even phones are having JavaScript engines. Your iPhone or your Android phone actually has a JavaScript engine. So React Native is going to be basically using that JavaScript engine as like a means to tap into your native device, right? Or to get access to native features. And because this JavaScript engine is stored locally on your system, essentially what will happen is that it's going to be very fast because, it doesn't have to retrieve a lot of data, or it doesn't have to retrieve 100% of its data from the internet, right? So React Native is, I would say, out of these three, the best source. Okay. All right. So we've got that. Now let's talk about how React Native works. Unfortunately, the source, I did mention this in the slides that I would show source, but my source actually has crashed for this one, so it won't work. But I'll talk about it, and let's talk about let's talk about how it is asynchronous, okay? And before that, let's actually talk about what is synchronous and asynchronous. So without looking at the slides, which I'm pretty sure many of you have already done, what is a synchronous function? Now, I'm pretty sure many of you may not know this, but what is a synchronous function, just in case someone does know it? All right, so you might have done circuits in physics class when you were at school, right? So you might have done about, electric circuits. And so essentially you can see synchronous functions in JavaScript are the virtual software equivalents to series circuits. Well, in series circuits, what happens? Well, say you have a series circuit. You have like a light bulb, you have a battery, and you have a switch. So essentially, I may be doing this very wrongly because I'm very bad at physics, but the battery may be connected to the switch, or the switch is connected to the light bulb, and the light bulb is connected to the battery. So essentially, everything is interconnected. And what would happen if, say, the battery is down or the switch stops working? Could anyone like to tell me what would happen in a series circuit?
Then the light bulb will not work. But if you've got multiple light bulbs connected to them, none of them will work.
Yeah, so essentially the whole circuit breaks, right? And so essentially that's what synchronous functions are, okay? Synchronous functions are essentially the virtual equivalent of series circuits. So everything's interconnected. And what will happen then is, say something happens on your JavaScript and it stops working, okay? Say like there are a gazillion packets sent and your JavaScript stops working. Your whole web page will crash. I, again, planned a source for this, but I'm not able to show it today because of Zoom and everything blocking my path. But the source will be up on the website, so you can look at that. So let's talk about asynchronous, okay? Now, what is a parallel circuit? Would anyone like to tell me? Again, digress
Parallel
question.
Circuit is basically when, let's say we've got multiple light bulbs connected to a battery and a switch, and the battery goes, or the switch goes dull on the stream. One of the light bulbs, one of the light bulbs goes on the stream. Not all of them will blow out. So so
a parallel circuit is essentially everything's kind of working on its own, right? And they're kind of interconnected through like a bridge. So if one thing stops working, the other can still do its thing, right? So that's how, say if you switch off your light, your fan will still spin. Or if, as Ashley correctly pointed out, if one light goes out, the other one will still work. So asynchronous functions are actually the same. So if like say the JavaScript breaks, the UI or the screen, you can still see things happening on the screen. So everything won't break. So so this is going to be an imaginative thing. So try to just paint this picture in your head. But let's talk about React Native. And React Native is asynchronous. So just imagine you have two threads. One is called the UI thread. So it's like got this title called the UI. And what does UI stand for? This is a very, very easy question, but what does UI stand for?
User interface.
Anyone else? Yeah, so user interface, right? So you have one thread that essentially fleshes out the user interface, or whatever the user can see on the screen. And you say you have another thread that's literally parallel to this one thread called JavaScript, okay? And essentially the JavaScript contains all the logic for your app. Now, say your code wants to show a button on the screen. And these threads are actually connected via a bridge. So imagine like in the middle of both threads, there's like this line connecting both of them. So say you wrote in your code that your app has to have a button. So your JavaScript will send over that bridge saying, hey, UI thread, give me a button. UI thread will send back this signal saying, all right, here you go, here's your button, and it'll be rendered on the screen. Now say you as the user, say for example, Ashley, presses that button, right? Taps on it. The UI thread will pass over another signal saying, hey, bro, JavaScript, the button was pressed. And the JavaScript will have like this on press thing that will basically say what will happen if the button is pressed. So the JavaScript will execute that. And again, my source is crashing for this one, but you can just look at that on the website once it's done. So essentially what will happen is, say there's this block in the JavaScript. Say there's this blockage, okay? None of your event handlers will fire, and your button will be locked up. But say you have something like a list, okay, or a scroll view, which basically scrolls back and forth. So say the JavaScript is blocking, you'll still be able to scroll back and forth because that UI is working on a separate thread, right? And it's not converted, or it's not talking to the JavaScript at that time. 1 second. Again, one more time, Jay Chandan, could you please mute yourself?
Pranav, I am muted only. I don't know why the voice is coming. It's muted now. I am muted and now I am talking.
Okay. Whoops.
I don't know what the problem is actually. Okay.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay. Yeah. So that's essentially what asynchronous and synchronous functions are. So any questions so far on React Native and how it's asynchronous? I know that was a mouthful. Anything at all? All right, so let's look at the differences between, this is going to be slightly theoretical, but let's look at the differences between the web and the mobile, okay? Because you have a mobile in your hand, okay? And the screen is much smaller, right? And it has a few things that web doesn't. So there are quite a few differences actually between web and mobile, okay? Now, off the charts, if you weren't looking at the slides, what would you think would be different in terms of how the things appear on the screen? What would be different?
Screen size would be different.
Yeah, size will be different. Okay. Anything else?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so let's actually talk about it. So there are a lot of component differences. Now, what is a component from React? Would anyone like to tell me? So a component is basically one piece of the UI to render, right, on the screen. So there are quite a few component differences, and the React documentation is the React Native documentation is very, very good to learn about all of them. But there are a few things. So div is what in the web world?
You say the building block?
To put few in block where we can have some JavaScript.
Yeah, so the div is essentially like a container, right, where we can store stuff. So like UI elements or JavaScript or React, so on and so forth, right? So in React Native, there's actually no notion of div. there's actually something called view. Okay, so view is the same thing, but this actually has a capital V. So all the components in React actually have a capital letter, so they start with a capital letter. So you have button, and it's a very subtle difference, but in React Native, the B is capitalized in button. And button actually uses, so in web, what would you write in your button code if you wanted to check, if you wanted to tell the button what to do if it was clicked? What is the exact
Maybe
prompt name?
something like search button, submit button, some
Yeah,
toggle
but
button.
what is exactly the prop name that you would specify to say what would happen when that button was clicked?
You'd use on click or on press.
Yeah, on click, right? So in the web, we would use on click. And he actually gave the answer right away. In mobile, it's actually, funnily enough, not on click because, hey, you know what? Facebook people were like, you know what? On click doesn't sound right because we don't take a mouse and literally click on it. So you know what? Let's make it on press because, hey, guess what? We're pressing on it because we're tapping on the screen and that's pressing the button, right? It's pretty weird logic, but yeah, it's named on
On
press.
down or on key. Something.
Yeah, so it's actually on press. So now in the web, we have the input statement that takes input from the user. In mobile, it's actually text input where the T and the I are capital. So these are a few nuances. Then we have the P tag. What does the P tag do in the web world?
Paragraph.
Yeah, so it renders some text on the screen, right? In React Native, it's literally called text, okay? So
Okay.
your tag is literally called text. And so all text that you want to write in React Native has to be wrapped by this text tag. And you have lists in the web. So what are the two kinds
Sorry,
of
just a
lists?
quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding the text tab, is the text also capitalized with a T?
Yeah. Okay. Good point. I almost forgot about that. Yes, the T is capitalized in the text tag. So all the first letters of all React components are going to be React Native components. My bad, are going to be capitalized. Okay. So now say we want a list, right? How would we render a list in web if you were not looking at the slide?
We have OL and UL, right? Ordered
Right,
and
so unordered and ordered lists. And actually, there are React Native doesn't have a notion of ULs and ordered lists. React Native actually has something called scrolling components. And for now, you can just know, we're actually going to discuss this in more detail in the next lecture. But for now, you can know that there's this component called scroll view that essentially just lets you scroll. Because on the web, by default, what happens is when basically the content goes over the size of the screen, it automatically scrolls. But because mobiles are smaller, I guess, or because the mobile world is just a slight bit behind the web world, that actually doesn't happen in the mobile world. So you actually have to define the scroll view, which will let the user scroll. So browser APIs don't exist. What are a few browser APIs? Now, I have not discussed browser APIs, but if you were to know, what are a few browser APIs? So browser APIs are things like
we
alert.
have an API for accessibility in browser.
Yeah, so the ARIA API or the alert, or you might have used prompt before. That essentially is like this weird prompt that just asks the user to type and click on the OK button.
Oh, are those actually APIs?
Yeah, those are actually APIs that are present, that are
I've
actually
used them
inbuilt
quite a
in every
lot.
browser. Honestly, I didn't know before I started React Native as well, so I thought they were just JavaScript things. But no, they're actually APIs. So alert, prompt, confirm. Oops. You could also have things like, for example, could anyone name any other browser APIs? Because I honestly forgot. A few other browser APIs probably would be, animations, CSS animations, or if you've ever worked with SVG at all, SVG is a browser API. So
Yeah.
those don't exist. And lastly, what would you least expect a mobile app to not have? Like not the app, but like React Native not to have? What would you least expect? What styles web?
CSS.
Yeah, so there's no CSS in React Native.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, for CSS, there's actually this thing. You essentially use JavaScript objects for styling, and we'll be talking about those in just a second.
Pranav,
So
would it be possible for you to mute everyone and so that when
yeah,
we
I'll
have to
actually
speak,
do
we can
that.
unmute?
That's actually a good idea. So I'm going to mute everyone, but you can unmute yourself if you so wish. Okay, there we go. So that's essentially everything that exists in but there have actually been a few things that have been polyfilled to exist in React Native. For example, alert actually exists in React Native. I told you a white lie a second ago. Prompt and confirm and so on and so forth may not exist, but alert actually does exist. Um, and a lot of the CSS tags do exist, but they're much more different because they're JavaScript keys. So questions so far on what exists in React Native and what the differences between the web world and React Native.
Do we have this heading level kind of? I don't know if we really need it in applications, but still.
A very good question. So there are actually no headings in React Native.
Yeah.
So you don't have headings. Even the span tag doesn't actually exist.
Okay.
And if you look in the web, thanks for informing me. While I was writing my slide, I actually forgot to include these. But you might have heard of the IMG tag that essentially gets images. That's actually, that's actually called image in React Native with a capital I. And even the anchor tag doesn't exist in React Native. So you actually have to use different libraries to put in links, which is kind of a bummer, but yeah.
So we can have a link maybe using some other library, or do we have to be satisfied with buttons?
No, you can actually have links, but it's not an easy process. It's not, I mean, if when you're beginning in React Native, it's not an easy process.
Okay.
But yeah, links you can have. You have to actually use different libraries.
Okay.
Other questions?
Can't you link HTML? Can't you make use of HTML links in React Native?
Very good. Yeah, so you can actually make use of something called a web view, which I talked about. So React Native actually lets you also render a web view. So say you want to render a few links, you can actually do that. Okay, but you cannot directly use HTML tags in React Native. Anything else? Anyone?
So what about? I think we can keep on asking, but still, do we have tables and those
Yeah,
stuff?
tables actually exist, but again, they have a capital T. Tables actually exist, and we'll be looking at tables in I think the next 1 or 2 lectures while we make our new application. So tables do exist, and but they have a different, slightly different API.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else? I'm open to questions. All right, so let's actually look at how to get started, right? Your hands must be itching to get on the keyboard and get started, right? Get going with React Native. So let's look at how to scaffold out our first React Native application. So it turns out you can't just pick up like a JavaScript file, write React Native code, and probably run it through like an interpreter or compiler. There's actually a few tools, and you have to scaffold out a React Native application, which basically means you have to the tools will take care of putting in the necessary files for you so you can get started with writing your code. And that's actually a good thing because you don't have to focus a lot on how to essentially take care of transpiling this code, because essentially what happens in React Native is all the UI elements, like if you type in view or text, say you type in a text element, that's actually converted and compiled down to the specific mobile's widget. So on Android, that'll be a text view if you've ever done Android programming at all. And in iOS, that'll be a UI text. So it'll be compiled. It'll essentially be compiled into Java or Swift code for you. But the JavaScript, the logic of the whole program will remain the same. Okay. So let's look at how to scaffold down our React Native app. So we're going to use this tool called Expo, and we're going to be talking about it in just a second here. So let's go into command prompt, because here's where we'll be spending a lot of time. If you're using a Mac or Linux PC, you can actually go into your terminal. And we're going to go into a convenient location. So I'm going to go to my desktop, go to RN50, which is my folder. And I'm going to make a directory here. You don't have to do this. This is going to be an optional, because this is going to be better for me, because I can just upload this whole directory in the source. So I'm just going to make a directory for just FYI, to make a directory on Windows at least, and even on Mac and Linux, you can just do mkdir space and the directory name or the folder name. So I'm just going to call
Just had to use that one.
yeah. So mkdir src2, and then we're going to go into that. How would you go into a directory for anyone? Ashley cannot answer this question because I know he knows it. Anyone else? Or if no one does, you can answer it. Right, so you can answer it yourself, Ashley.
Okay, we will be using CD, which in turn stands for change directory.
Wonderful.
And then after CD, you'll type in the name of the folder you'd like to get into, or the directory in this case, and then just press enter, and yeah, that's how.
Yeah, so you would type in your directory name and you would go there, right? So wonderful. So very well framed. So we're into SRC2. Now, say we want to make an app. Would anyone like to just give me a name for an app? You can just say anything you like.
Test app.
Yeah, that's pretty conventional actually. First app. So we actually have to install this tool called Expo. And I presume all of you have installed Node. If you haven't, you can just do it from, it's a pretty simple installation. So to actually install Expo, you would type this command, npm install, because npm is Node's package manager, and package manager basically helps you like import all those libraries. So npm install -g expo-cli, and all of it's small. Now I'm not going to hit enter and show you what happens, because I already have Expo installed on my machine. But once you type this and press enter, it will show a lot of this weird cryptic text, and it'll be done. Okay. Actually, let me press enter. It's going to show some things. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. Oh. There we go. And we have this npm terminal, and it's just going to run through a lot of code. We're actually going to exit out of that. Or, close that. Something is ringing. Okay, I'll have to close. Okay, there we go. So let's actually do that. Yeah. And the whole command window just crashed. Right, so I'm just going to go back. So cd OneDrive /desktop /rn50 /src2. So essentially, when you press enter, it will show a lot of this weird text, and it'll be done. And you can essentially just be done with it. And then you have to restart your terminal, and then you type expo in it, which I'll show you what to do. And also, you type expo. And before I forget, if you're on a Mac or Linux, you have to type sudo npm install -g expo-cli. I've written that command on the group. So expo init, and what was our app name again? First app, right? So first _ app. Or, I forgot. Underscore was actually not allowed, so we're just going to make A capitalized. And we press enter. So hopefully nothing breaks. Let's actually maximize my window. So this actually, the problem with Expo is that it's really laggy, and it takes a long time to. And there we go. So we've got this huge template screen, okay? And you can choose. Well, I would say you go with the manage workflow and blank, because that'll be bare bones. And do not go with the bare workflow because that's going to be a lot of work. We're going to talk about the bare workflow later, but for now, go with the managed workflow in blank. So I would just say press 1 and hit enter. This is gonna it's gonna run. Now I'm using something called Yarn, which is actually a better package manager than NPM. And you can just go to Yarn. I forget the website link, but essentially, I would say since you guys are actually starting out with React Native, you could just use NPM. So now it's going to show this huge installing JavaScript dependency screen, huge because this is going to take a long time. So just wait it out. And on that note, let's take a quick breather here and until this gets over, hopefully in around 5 to 6 minutes. So see you in that much time. And if you do have any questions at that time, you can always just tell me during the meeting. I will still be here. So yeah, let's quickly break.
Pranav,
Yeah.
is there a way to check which project I'm busy installing? Because I can't move with the arrow keys in the command prompt.
Unfortunately, no. You could press Shift and up arrow, and Shift and down arrow. So if you're using NVDA,
Okay.
hopefully Expo went right for you. So it's gonna give you this really weird installing.
Installed. Which one should I have installed?
Oh, it's done for you. Wow. You mean Expo, right?
Yes,
So-
I've completed Expo
Expo
and Expo Cli. I've completed all those. I mean, the package, the app. I mean,
Yeah, good. Now you can just restart your command window. You can just exit and restart it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure which one of the examples should I have installed.
Oh, the examples?
Yes.
You mean my source code?
No, the one where you say Expo init.
Ah.
Yes.
Okay, so you could just type Expo. Oh, you mean the template?
Yeah, the template. I'm sorry for my bad wording. English is not
No,
my
no problem.
first
You can
language.
actually, so the arrow keys actually, Expo does say that you can use arrow keys, but that doesn't work. So you have to use the managed workflow and blank, that is 1. So you can just press 1 and hit enter.
Okay, let me try it again.
Yeah. No, mine's
Okay,
taking
it's
a lot of
installing
time.
again.
Yeah, it should do installing JavaScript dependencies.
I've
Unfortunately,
got so
mine's
many
actually.
templates.
You've got a lot of templates, yeah. In fact, if you want to do like bottom tabs and stuff, you could use those. I prefer going with blank because it's just easier to completely revamp my whole application based on whatever Expo offers.
Well, I've actually got only 3 templates because the first one failed. The second one was not the one that I wanted. And now the third one seems to be the one that I'm looking for. So do you think it would be fine if I could just delete these 2 templates that I'm not using?
Yeah, you can. I
Okay.
think I'm not sure if you can delete templates from Expo, but yeah, because a lot of Expo actually takes place in the cloud. So the problem with Expo is that you have to actually have a working internet connection for everything, even
Yeah, that's another.
running
But
your project.
even these days, for everything, you need to have a working internet connection.
That's right. All right, so mine's done. I'm gonna.
I'm still installing, but it's okay. I'll just catch up some point. I think I don't know.
Yeah.
Shouldn't take
I'm up.
much longer.
Yeah, I'm just gonna wait for yours to actually finish.
Sorry for making you wait now,
No, no,
because
no.
I'm now
That's
making
that's
everyone wait.
completely okay. That's okay. I mean, they get a break, so.
Come on.
So yeah, we're almost done. Actually, we only have 4 more slides to go, and then I'm gonna open up question time for anything.
Well, this looks much better than React Native, I must say.
You mean React, right?
I mean, I'm so stupid. React, yes.
No
React.
problem. It is, especially because for the next, let me count, 10 weeks, we're only going to be focusing on React Native. So we're going to go much slower.
So there's not going to be any HTML or CSS or whatever.
No HTML, no. That there's going to be styling, but that's going to be much easier, I'd say. At least for me, it's much easier than CSS.
Okay, yeah, because CSS is kind of a pain to
It
deal with.
is, especially when you have difficulty seeing the screen. It's really hard to write CSS.
Yes.
Just gonna check participants really quick. Oh, I saw them. All right. Is everyone with me so far?
Yes, it's just done installing right now on time.
Oh, wow. Okay. So if you're doing this on your computer, well, Ashley just showed a good example of how to do it. So, so we've got this. Let me just share my screen again. I'm gonna share. So we've got this command window, and let's actually go. So it's made this folder, okay, and we're gonna open up in File Explorer real quick. So let's actually go into it. So cd first app. And now say we want to run this on my phone. So I'm actually going to quickly connect my phone in and mirror it onto my screen in just a second here. So there are a few steps to do this. You first have to type this command, expo space register, or expo login actually. And before that, on your phone, you have to download the Expo client, which you can get from the iOS App Store or the Google Play Store. And you just have to sign up there. It's a very straightforward thing. Then in the command window, you type expo space login and hit enter. I'm actually not showing this because I already have my account set up. So then it'll just ask you for some info. You just keep typing and press enter and you're done. And then what you do is in this project, to start it up, you type expo space start. Very, very simple. And in theory, what this is going to do is it's going to start up a server. What is a server? Anyone? So it's just some place to run a certain application or store some data, right? So that's essentially what a server is. And so it's going to start this server, and it'll give you this. In a second, it'll actually give you this URL. Now, in your thing, it'll actually open up a browser, okay? And you can disable that. I usually keep it disabled by pressing Shift-D. In the command window, it will disable the DevTools, because actually the problem with DevTools is it lags a lot. And you can see this URL that's come on the screen. That's http://localhost:19,002. That's essentially my port, and that's a server that's run up on my computer now. So you can just visit this URL. In fact, you can visit on your computer right away, or no, that won't work, because you can visit this x://198 points, whatever this URL is, on the screen, and you will see what I'm seeing. So this is open this command window on the screen, and basically what this is now, this is our server, so we can control everything from here. So let's actually mirror my screen to my computer, so I can show you what to do. The only reason why I didn't mirror it so far was this lags again. So let's mirror this. So we're going to open that. And you can just ignore my screen. I think it crashed. This is not going good. So let's actually run this mirror bat again. Hopefully. So essentially what this is this just lets me mirror my screen to my computer via a USB cable. Oh, whoops. There we go. Okay, why is that not running? Oh, there we go. So we have our window here. And this is my phone, okay? This is essentially my phone screen. And I'm actually going to let my screen reader speak as well, so that, you know, whoever is visually impaired can hear it. And we're actually going to open up my Expo client. Just tell me if this is too fast and I'll slow it down. So let's open up Expo. And now in Expo, I'm going to see my app. So recently in development, we'll see this first app on Pranav's laptop. So I'm going to double tap on this, or tap on this if you're sighted. And this should open the app on my phone. Now this takes a little time again. And you can do this quite easily actually. So it's just building JavaScript bundles. I'm going to quickly move back to my terminal, because so you can see what happens on the terminal. So it'll build this JavaScript bundle, and we'll talk about that in a future lecture. But just again, bear with me for now. So this is going to quickly build the JavaScript bundle. And it lags for a second and then it speeds up. So it's still building the JavaScript bundles. 84% done. And this again is going to take time. It's actually going to depend on your system use of resources. And we're almost done now. And we're done with the JavaScript bundle. So it's going to take another second here, just because it likes to take that. Let's focus on my screen here. And before that, actually, we're gonna see. It's still doing its thing.
Open Android.
So let's open that. So now it's going to open our app. So let's focus on our screen. And you're going to see in a second. Hopefully this demo doesn't crash.
Command prompt C0 1 column 2.
Whoops.
Command media control 1 column 3. PowerPoint slideshow administrator. C Windows System 32 CMD Extro 2 C0 1 column 1. Command prompt C0 1 column 2. Media control 1 column. PowerPoint slideshow administrator. C Windows System 32 CMD Extro 2 column administrator. C Windows System 32 CMD external senior. Senior.
Oh.
Senior 1 column 2.
Okay, that's what made it crash.
Senior window navigation button to recent location button. Command prompt media control 2 column 1. Command prompt expo terminal blank.
So let's actually try that again, because that didn't work out very well.
Senior 1 column 2. Senior window navigation button toolbar. Back Windows C. Alt 0 button.
Sorry for
Senior 1 column 1.
lag and the technical issues, but this actually did work. So let's open up Mirror.
Command prompt administrator. Media control PowerPoint slash C Windows System 32 Windows System 32 Senior 1 column 1. Command prompt administrator. Media PowerPoint C Windows System 32 CMD Extro C Windows System 32 CMD external senior. Restore available R. Properties default edit C. Audio 5000.
And there we go. So we have our screen, my phone screen, and let's open up Expo. Let's open up First App. And there we go. So we've got this screen on my phone that says open up app.js to start working on your app. And it'll give this small warning, that's just Expo. So we've got this screen, right? And we're going to close it for now, but we're going to return to it in a second, okay? So that's how you essentially run a project on your computer. So let's close that. I'm going to close in Mirror again. So before we actually move on, let's actually take a look at what React Native has given us, okay? So I'm just going to quickly move into my folder here. There we go. So you can see there's this folder called First App. And before that, does anyone have any questions related to how to get the app running on your phone? I know that because with the technical issues, it was hard to understand, but hopefully you got it. Nothing? All right, so let's look at what files we have. So we've got this .expo folder, and you can just ignore that. That's essentially utils and modules required for Expo to run. We've got Expo shared that essentially allows you to run things on your phone. We've got Git. Now, if you have Git installed, the good thing about Expo is that it gives you Git, so you can get version control right away. What is Git, anyone? If you've watched my supplement lecture on Git. All right, so Git is a version control system, which basically allows you to control versions of a same project or a file. We've got assets. Now, what would you think would be in this assets folder? Would anyone like to tell me?
Most probably like a graphic or something.
Yeah, so you have different assets, like things that are not code. So if you have images or if you have sound later on in an app, you would store it in the assets folder, right? And this is actually required for React Native and Expo. So you can't, it's like not an optional folder, so you have to have it. Node modules, which are basically modules required for Node. We've got this git ignore. If you've used Git at all, I haven't used the git ignore, but if you have, you can, you know how to use it. We've got app.js. Okay, we're going to come back to this. App.json, which basically has certain, what would you think that app.json would have? If you just heard the name.
Properties for the app.
Yeah, so properties like probably the name, the version, and so on and so forth. And again, Expo needs these, especially while building your app for the phone. So like while building an APK file for Android and an IPA file for iOS, it needs this. You've got this Babel config or Babel config.js. What is Babel? Anyone? We learned it in React.
It allows us to transpile code into what is that? It allows us to transpile React code into JS.
Yeah, so JSX code into JavaScript, right? Essentially. So it turns out that even React Native uses JSX, so it transpiles JSX into JavaScript. You've got package.json, which basically contains all the dependencies or the packages for your project. And we've got yarn.log. Now, because I'm using yarn, you may not have this file at all. So what did our screen there say? Open up what file to start working on your project?
JS app or app.js, I'm sorry.
Yeah, app.js, right? So open up app.js. So let's jump right into app.js and see what this has to offer. Now, don't worry about the code. We're still talking about how to run this on your phone. So we've got this a lot of code. We've got some import statements. And let's get our expo thing back up on my phone. I'm going to get mirror back running on my laptop. Or actually, I can just do it. Oh, that would let me do it. Okay. So let's just run mirror quickly. So that we can get my screen back on my laptop. There we go. So we have this screen, so you can see it saying open up app.js to start working on your app. We have app.js open. Now, here's the cool thing. Say I change something here. Say I add in the text component here. Don't worry about this. I write some text here and you'll get to see this. And there we go. So I'm going to save that. Oh, whoops. I'm going to close the text tag. Don't worry about the code. We're just going to talk about it in a second. So save that. Now, see what happened. I saved that file and just see what came on my screen. Well, we have this open up app.js to start working. And then we have, hi, and welcome to our first app. Actually, this is your first app. Congratulations. I wrote that in the text tag. And when I saved it, our server automatically changes the code on the phone to reflex. So you can easily, you don't even have to do anything on your phone and it'll automatically save and reload. So questions about how the folder looks and what everything is. Anyone at all? Anything?
This is equivalent to p tag, right?
Yeah, the text tag is equivalent to the p tag, and we're going to talk about that just now, in just a second, after I take questions. All right, so let's now talk about. Let's talk about components. Okay. So, what were components in React? We're actually going to close my mirror. What are components in React? Would anyone like to tell me?
Could it be essentially like the text view, or the text component, or the view component?
So those are components, and but those are inbuilt components in React. What are or React Native? What are normal components? Like we created something called class app. So essentially, components are just things that render some UI to the screen, right? Or something to the screen, like a text or a button. So in React Native, we actually have two types of components. So we have this. So if you look at my code here, or if you've already done this on your computer and made this application, I've opened this in Notepad just so that VS Code doesn't start lagging. And apparently there's a new update in VS Code that's made it crash on my system. But yeah, so essentially we've got this. If you ignore these import statements, you can see export default function app. You can ignore export default, or actually you don't need to. Why did we write export default? I'm pretty sure you may not have noticed this, but why did we write, or we didn't actually. You can just ignore export default, and you can look at this. It says function app, right? And it just says return. There's a view that has some styles. And there are two text components, and there's this status bar thing at the bottom. And there we go. And so this is called a stateless functional component, which is basically a component that takes props and returns some UI, okay? It doesn't have state and it doesn't have anything else. What are props? Again, review question from React. What are props?
Properties from a class.
Yeah, so props are essentially properties, right? And turns out, weirdly enough, that functional components or stateless functional components take props as well. And they just return some UI, okay? So they have no logic of state and so on and so forth. So let's see another example. I'm actually going to rename this to, let's call it intro. And let's create another functional component. So let's just say export default function. We're not going to call this app yet. We're just probably going to call this hi. And my indentation may be terrible. But the problem with Notepad is I have to write everything by hand. So return. We're not going to put any styling. So view. And let's return a text. So text is, as you remember, the component that is used to wrap all text. So let's just say hello world. Hello world. Or in fact, let's actually change that. Let's change it to reflect props. So hello, this dot props dot name. Close the text tag and close the view tag. And we'll just close the function. So there we go. There's a component. And those are essentially stateless functional components. Questions about stateless functional components? All right. Now let's talk about the other side of the spectrum. What's called a React dot component. Okay. You may have remembered that from React we actually imported something called, or we didn't import it, but we extended it. It's called, we said class app extends React dot component, right? Which basically did what? Would anyone like to tell me?
Render something on the screen.
Yeah, so it essentially, it essentially took care of rendering, right? Or it basically gave you all the functionality of React, right? So let's write a class, just like we wrote. So export default class. Now let's write this as app, and we'll say extends React dot component. And here, let's actually make this a state. Let's give it a state. So constructor will have props, just like React. Okay, this is very, very much like React. And that'll have a super props. So let's write a counter application again, and we would say this dot state equals. We would want to have count. What would we set the value of count? Probably 0 or 1, right? So 0. Close that. And there we go. So we have a constructor. Now let's return something. So let's just say a render function. It's annoying to type out everything, but hopefully I'll get the VS Code fixed. And let's say view. Now again, ignore the style component that I put. Styles.container. Because we're actually going to focus on style in just a second here. In fact, in next lecture, let's just say, let's render a few things. So let's render the hi component with name equals to someone's name. My teacher's here and she's awesome, so I'm going to render her name. So now let's render our intro component, which doesn't have any props. This will look very weird, but and now let's put a button. So let's render a button here. So button on press equals this dot increment. Now this you can't just say there's no closing tag for the button, so it's actually just you have to specify everything through props. So the title would be increment, and we can actually give an accessibility label that basically makes it read to screen readers. So I usually like to give an accessibility label to all my buttons. So accessibility label will be increment, and we close it with a slash creator. Okay, so we're done with our oops, forgot to indent. And let's actually close our view. And we've done that. Questions about anything about what we've written so far? So essentially, React.components have a notion of state, and that's essentially the only difference between a stateless functional component and a React.component. And in fact, in React.components, you can actually specify methods. So those are actually slightly better to kind of write, if you want interactive code. Any questions about anything that we've written? All right, so let's just write our increment function because you know what, we're almost done. So increment, how would we write this? Would anyone like to tell me? I've written the increment equals left parenthesis, right parenthesis equals greater. Would anyone like to tell me how do I change this? How do I increment that value of state from what we learned in React?
Probably this dot set state.
Yeah, this dot set state. You open parentheses, open brace, and what would we change here? And how would we change it?
Okay, we are going to change count. So we're just going to say count plus 1, I think.
Yeah, this dot state dot count plus 1, because remember we can't, because it's stored in state, so this dot state dot count plus 1. And that we go. So we have our increment function. And let's close our class. And there we go. So we have a component. So let's actually open up Mirror and run this and see how this works. Whoops. Oh, that's why I didn't run. Okay. I'm just going to switch on my screen reader. And we're going to open up Mirror to run this project. Now I'll link Mirror as well, just in case you want to use it. Oh, there we go. So there's my screen, and if I open up Expo. Oh, oops, I have to open up my app again. And we got a syntax error. That's weird. Why? Why do you think? Going back to my code, I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a quick hint. No, actually, that wasn't the thing. I'll give you a quick hint. Let's read our error. Oh, that's my error. So only one default export allowed. Let's change that. And we're going to talk about exporting and importing just when we look at our next error. And there we go. All right, so it renders the two texts, but it doesn't render the button. Why? Why doesn't it render the button? It's not erroring, and it's rendering those two text components, the two first, stateless components. It's only rendering one, in fact. Why? So let's look back at our code, and let's fix the obvious, which is that's fine. But if you notice, it's not rendering that button that we stated, right? But the B is capital. So that actually takes us on to the next thing. Before that, why? Let me ask you, why would it not render the button? I'll give you a hint. The answer lies in the first 3 lines. So the first line says import status bar from export status bar. Then the second line says import React from React, and the third line says import view, text, style sheet from React Native.
You probably need to import the button.
Yeah, so we need to import the button, right? And let's import that. And that actually takes us on to the next topic, which is importing and exporting. So in React, unfortunately, unlike React Native, you cannot get access to anything without importing it. So everything that you do relies based on importing and exporting, except for core JavaScript logic. So even the text component, and in fact, even the view component is imported, if you notice. So let's import the button here. Now these are actually JavaScript objects that you import. So you can see import, we've written, if you look at our third statement, we say import open brace style sheet, which is something that we're going to talk about next lecture, text and view from React Native, and React Native is in quotes. And we'll actually add to that. So let's put a comma after view, and let's add in button. And now if I save, something is still breaking. So now you might be right. So now something's breaking, right? Well, short answer is actually no, because the problem with Expo is that you have to maybe reload it sometimes. So let's actually do that. Let's close it. Open up Expo. Open that. And we see our text, but we still don't see the button. Well, that may be a code error. So let's take a look at our code here. So we've got a button, and here's a chance for everyone who can spot the bug. So this is not an intentional bug, honestly. So everything looks fine, right? Actually, no, because we don't have something called this.state. So we have just state, and it's not this.setState, it's actually just setState. So that's and it still doesn't work. Well, that'll have to be fixed, but that actually does lead us on to our next topic, that is essentially importing and exporting. So just like we imported the button module or the text module or the view module, you may want to import your own modules, right? Or export them. So if you look at our things, we are saying export, export, and export default for each of our functions. So let's talk about all these words. So import is basically you bring something in. Export is you kind of send it out. So say another file want to use your same component, they can easily do that. What would export default mean? Anyone would like to guess? What would export default mean? So if you look at our line, if you look at our code, you can see that we're importing some things from something, right? So we're importing style sheets, so on and so forth from React Native. Say we wanted to just say import star from React Native or just import React Native. What that is going to do is it's essentially going to export the default. So React Native is going to export the default class. Or say someone just said import app.js. That's going to export our default class, which is app, right? So they're going to get access to app. So that's essentially what importing and exporting is. Any questions? I know that I made an error there, but hopefully that wasn't too terrible. Any questions based on importing, exporting, and the components? No? All right, so let's move on to Expo. So what do we use Expo for so far?
To run the apps written on computer on a mobile device.
Yeah, we used Expo to run the app written on the computer on our phone, right? And turns out Expo is actually a whole suite of tools. So what Expo does give you is it gives you this CLI, which stands for what? Would anyone want to guess? Because we're running this in a command window.
Client, I think.
Sorry?
Client.
No, close guess enough. But any other guesses on what CLI would mean? It's a full form. So command, so if you say, I'll give you a hint. C is command. Command line. You're very close. Almost there.
Interface.
Wonderful. Wonderful. You guys just got it. So yeah, Expo does give you a command line interface. It actually earlier used to give you a user interface or a graphical user interface. But they stopped that now. That used to be called the XDE, but they stopped that now. So they only give you a command line interface, which basically lets you write code and type in commands in the command window or the terminal window to actually run these. Expo also gives you this phone client, and that is responsible for what are we using the phone client for? So we're using it to run our apps, right? We're using the phone application to run the Expo apps and test them while we're developing. But let's face it, while you're making an app, you don't want everyone to install the Expo client, log into your account, and then run the app. That's going to be very, very bad user experience, right? And I mean, you don't want to give your account out as well. Who would want to do that, right? So Expo also gives you what's called a building tool, which lets you, through the command line, build your applications into binaries like APK files or IPA for iOS. So you can just publish these to the appropriate store. And we're going to talk about building later on. But just know that Expo allows you to do that. And finally, it gives you an SDK. Anyone would want to guess what an SDK is? The S stands for software.
Software development kit.
Wonderful. So SDK stands for a software development kit. Ashley, since you answered it, would you want to explain a little more about it?
This is, I'm going to take Android SDK for an example, or Android Studio.
That's fine.
This essentially allows us to compile the software for the native platform you're compiling your software on. So, and it also gives you tools. For example, building your application is a tool, debugging, and all of those.
So it basically gives you a set of tools to make, to test, and to deploy your applications, right? So Expo gives you that as well. And this is going to be a whole theoretical section. And it finally gives you something called, and I would like you guys to visit this if you want, snack.expo.io. If you're using a screen reader, it may not be that helpful, but if you're sighted, this is a very, very helpful tool. So this is something called the Expo Snack. And it's weird because it's named Snack, but it's really useful if you don't want to connect in a phone, or you don't want to have a phone next to you. So it basically lets you just write in React Native code on the web, on the website, and have it all run in the browser. So I could have used that if I wanted to, but I just feel running it on the phone is better. All right, and with that, we come to an abrupt end 2-hour lecture. But this is not ended. If you want to stay, if you do have questions, you can stay back. I'm opening up a 15 to 20-minute question session for anyone who wants to ask anything related to JavaScript, React, or React Native, or computer science in general. And in next week, we'll essentially be talking about lists and user input, and we'll be looking at a to-do application. You have to design one for React, but we'll be looking at how to design it for React Native. So yeah, for those who do not have questions, see you next week. And for those who do have questions for anything, I decided, especially because React was a huge mouthful of water from a fire hose, you can stay back and ask me anything you like, based on React Native, JavaScript, or anything in computer science. So yeah, I'll open up the question sessions and you can just unmute and ask me your question. And also, if you may have noticed on the website, I've put up the form as well as the instructions for Project Zero. That's the to-do app. So you can ask me questions about the to-do app as well, and I'll try to answer you. All right, we have nothing. That's completely okay. If you do, supplement lectures will be coming out throughout the week based on all topics covered today. And you can just go through those as well. So there's no project for this week. So if you want, you can focus on the to-do app for React. And that is due at the end of the course. I'd also like to thank my teacher, Sonal ma'am, who's attended today's session. She actually decided to sit in, and it's quite early. I'm pretty sure it's going to be quite early for her because she stays in the States. So thanks for attending. It's wonderful to have you here. And yeah, so with that, we come to the end of today's lecture. Again, I'm pretty sure this was a mouthful. And it was really weird, especially because I had the bug at the end, and honestly, I was not really sure about everything at that end because something just broke and I couldn't see what broke. But you should be able to see source code soon on the website. And yeah, with that, we come to the end of lecture 2. So yeah, bye everyone, and see you next Friday. Also, if you do have questions, you can write on the WhatsApp group or email me directly. I'll put in the email ID.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Okay, see you next week.
See you next week.